I've always been the introvert type. I guess I was more of a loner. I had no real friends. I didn't get along well with my classmates, and I wasn't even close to my siblings either. Yeah, it was that bad. I'd rather spend my time in my room reading romantic novels or watching romantic movies on my phone. And other times, I find myself going through the random profiles of cute guys on Facebook. And that's where I met Dave. Dave was a cute guy for sure. He had this dashing look like one of the princes from the novels I'd been reading. From his profile, I saw that he also lived in Florida, which was exactly where I grew up. I kept stalking him on Facebook for days. Nevertheless, I never liked or commented on any of his posts. Finally, I sent him a waving sticker. Who does that? Well, I did. Immediately when I sent it to him, I instantly developed this intense look of desperation in my eyes, and all I could think of was how he was going to ignore me. A lot of things kept running through my mind. Well, of course, I had less than 20 followers, most of which were members of my family. So why should he bother? I don't use any pictures on my profile, and I've only been posting about novels and movies I have watched. So there was no way he could see what I looked like, but I was certain he would know I was a girl from my profile name. After a while, he replied to me with, "Hey." I was so excited. That kind of happiness that made you get butterflies in your belly. From that day on, we talked almost every day. He always said sweet things to me whenever we talked, but I knew for sure that he was flirting with me. He later asked me if I would go on a date with him on Valentine's Day. Of course, why not? I was eager to go. He said he'd let me know the location later. On Valentine's Day, we talked in the morning, but he never said anything about the date. I didn't want to sound desperate, so I didn't mention it too. Later that evening, he texted me a location, saying meet me at Christini's. I quickly looked it up on Google Maps with anticipation, and I found out it's about 20 miles away. It was quite far for an introvert like me. I have never gone that far away from home on my own, but I didn't want to ruin my first date, so I told him I would be there. And of course, my family had no idea about my secret relationship. I boarded a taxi. Immediately when I got off the taxi, I saw him. He looked as handsome as he did in his pictures, which is rare, and I felt lucky as he walked me to the table. He ordered a glass of wine for two. We chatted for a while, and I like him more. I was very cautious of time, so I told him I'd be leaving early. He was disappointed, but he still offered to drop me off at my place. Once I got into his car, he started driving. It was quite fast, so I asked him to slow down politely. He didn't even blink, neither did he say anything. I noticed that the path he took wasn't familiar, too. I was already scared. I shouted at him. I was more intense this time. My heart was pumping fast. I was scared. I pleaded with him to let me go, but instead, he took out a small pocket knife and threatened to stab me. He drove past a police vehicle, and luckily for me, they followed behind him. I thought he would stop, but he didn't. The police began to chase him. I finally built up the courage to fight him. He stabbed me on my thigh with his pocket knife. The knife tore deep through my skin and felt a great amount of pain. I didn't stop fighting. After a while, he lost control of the steering wheel, and the car swerved sharply, crashing into a tree. The crash drove the engine through the dashboard, and we were both stuck in the wreckage. The police got to the scene and called for an ambulance. We were both taken to the hospital. I woke up to find my mom crying beside me, and my right hand handcuffed to the hospital bed. I sickly asked, "Why?" They said I was trying to get away with a wanted murderer. I told them what had happened, and he later admitted to the crime and told them that I was the victim. He lost both his legs in the accident, and I broke my spine. Now I live my life bedridden. Most days I cry my eyes out. I got back my introvert lifestyle. At least it's what I've always wanted. But not this way. This happened to me in college, many years ago on Valentine's Day, but it still sticks out as one of my most horrifying dating experiences. This was your standard college hookup. We met at a party, drank sickly sweet mixed drinks, passionately made out in front of our mutual friends, and wordlessly made our way to my tiny room, where we had sex in my tiny twin bed. The next morning, I woke up feeling excited about the night before. I had always thought this girl was pretty when I saw her stroll through the library, and she made me laugh all evening. When I rolled to my right side, her back was to me, and I remember smiling while I looked at the freckles on the back of her shoulder. Then, she made a jerking movement, and then another. She repeated it over and over again. Is she having a bad dream? I naively asked myself as I inched closer to her. Nope, I was the one having a bad dream, except it was real life, and my hookup buddy had white foam forming on her lips. She was having a seizure. I began to panic. I tried to reach my phone to call for help, but I couldn't even recall where I'd kept it. I ran outside to look for help. I've never been in a situation like this before. I ran to my next door neighbor. It was 3 a.m. When we returned to my room, she was looking lifeless. We called emergency, and they assured us they would be there in a few minutes. I could feel my hands dripping with sweat. The thought of seeing a dead person, or so I thought, sent chills down my spine. Is she dead? I kept asking my friend. After a while, she stood up slowly and dressed up as though nothing had happened. I tried telling her what had just happened, but she didn't seem to be bothered. She said she wanted to be on her way. I told her to wait for the ambulance to get properly checked, and it was 3 a.m, but she insisted. I quickly picked up my clothes to see her off since she insisted. She walked out of the room, and I followed her. Then, as she approached the stairs to go down, suddenly she began to shake and fell through the stairs. I rushed toward her. She had already banged her head on the staircase while she was falling. Her head was bleeding, and she wasn't moving either. I started crying. This was too much for me to handle. I carried her almost lifeless body downstairs, and the ambulance came. She was rushed to the ER and treated immediately. Doctors and nurses swarmed around her like little bumblebees busy at work. An X-ray and CT scan later. She later woke up after several surgeries. This horrific scene always played in my head each time I hear the word Valentine. It happened 8 years ago, but I still feel like it was yesterday. Romance has always had a dark side. Something sinister, possessive, even fatal lurks behind the desire to attract and be attracted. This particular night, my boyfriend had just left my place. It was Valentine's Day. We had spent a good time celebrating the Festival of Love, or so it is called. I was so tired when he dropped me off at my place. I managed to feed my dog that night, although I was too tired. I later took my bath and decided to relax on my couch. I had not been alone before. My roommate Dorothy already told me she was going to spend the night at her boyfriend's. So for the first time, I was alone. I had my dog to keep me company. I decided to listen to the news and maybe fall asleep from there. On the news, there was a killer on the loose. I went to lock all my windows and doors, except for one, which was faulty and wouldn't close. Then I fell asleep. Suddenly, I was awakened by a dripping sound. I was thoroughly scared. I could feel chills down my spine. I suddenly had goosebumps all over me, and my hands were shaky. I checked everywhere, but there was nothing. I tried to go back to sleep. I put my hands down on the bed for a reassuring lick from my dog. The dripping sound continued. I stood up to check the taps in the kitchen, bathroom, and everywhere else, but I couldn't find anything. I returned to my bedroom, put my hand down again for my dog to lick. The sound continued, and I was too afraid to fall asleep again. But as my dog quietly licked my hands, I fell asleep. In the morning, when I opened the closet, I found my dog dead and hanging upside down. I screamed out loud. The dripping sound I'd heard was from my dog's blood. The killer left a message on the door of my closet. The message read, "Humans lick better." I reported the incident to the police and moved out that same day.